I think I was born a dreamer. I still remember the first time I heard Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. I was far too young to understand all that lay behind that speech. But my dad had taught me enough about justice, even at that age, especially about how we live together as with all our differences, that I heard in those words something I could buy into, and I was hooked. I, too, had a dream for my nation, for my country, and for me. That was August. By the end of November, President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. And my dreaming was rocked, as was that of the nation. Soon our dreams became nightmares as race riots and anti-war protests swept across the country. And then came 1968. And on the Memphis balcony, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot dead. A month later, Bobby Kennedy lay in a pool of his own blood. In August, the Republican National Convention and the ensuing riots in Chicago. In 1970, there were 4 dead in Ohio. The riots continued. The war dragged on. And we were living a nightmare. Through it all, the words of Dr. King continued to resonate. Dr. King drew heavily for that speech on the material from Isaiah that we refer to as Second Isaiah, from the prophet that spoke to the people who were living in exile in Babylon at the time. These were people whose lives had been totally devastated. Everything and every aspect of their life that had given them support and security had been stripped away from them, and they were left desolate and despairing. To them, the prophet came with a word of hope, a dream of a new day. A day when the deserts would blossom and flourish, when waters would gush from the wilderness, when roads would be built to take the people back home to Jerusalem. A deliverer would come, a Messiah would arise and liberate them from their bondage in Babylon. The dream was realized when Cyrus, king of Persia, swept down out of the north and conquered the Babylonians and released the Jews to return home. It was hardly a mass exodus, but those who did make the trip from Babylon to Jerusalem found a very different picture than the one that Isaiah had painted for them. It was a time of desolation. The once proud nation and city lay in ruins. There was economic devastation, political unrest. There was so much to do. It seemed hopeless. Their dreams were fast becoming nightmares. It was into this world that the prophet we know as Third Isaiah appears. He brings no dreams, but his words cut quick. He attacks the political and religious establishments that want to preserve a status quo, that want to return things to the way they once were. He critiques their pontificating and their rights. He attacks those who would divide and speaks a word of work, hard work, of rebuilding a nation from the ground up. The most powerful of images of that section of Isaiah, for me, is the line that calls us to be repairers of the breach. Think a moment about that image. We are called to be reconcilers of the differences. And notice how Isaiah calls us to behave and where he positions us in the midst of the conflict. It's not on the extremes. It's in the middle. It's in a very dangerous position. But it is the position that we are called to be in. For if we are going to do the hard work of reconciliation, we must do it between the warring factions. We can't do it from the outside. We must do it from the middle. We must be those who gather the sides together. Instead of allowing them to continue to harbor their extreme positions, to demand compromise, and to not be satisfied with anything less. To work together until all find healing and reconciliation. This is hard and difficult work. And it begins with us, in our own lives. When we catch ourselves drifting to the edges, when we work to divide rather than unite. Where in our life right now can we bring healing in the midst of division? Instead of protest and words, where can we act in a way that brings people together? In a way that unites, in a way that rebuilds? Where are we being called to be the repairers of the breach? It's not easy. And it will take the best that we have to offer and all our creative genius. But it is work that comes with promise. The promise is that we are not in that work alone, but we are rather participating in what God has already begun. Yes, I guess I've always been a dreamer. And this one won't end in a nightmare, I assure you. Let streams of living justice flow down upon the earth. Give freedom's light to captives. Let all the poor have worth. The hungry hands are pleading. The workers claim their rights. The mourners long for laughter. The blinded seek for sight. Make liberty a beacon. Strike down the iron power. Abolish ancient vengeance. proclaim your people's hour. For healing of the nations, for peace that will not end, for love that makes us lovers, God grant us grace to mend. Weave our varied gifts together, knit our lives as they are spun. On your loom of time enroll us, till our thread of life is run. O great weaver of our fabric, bind church and world in one. Dye our texture with your radiance, light our colors with your sun. Your cities built to music, we are the stones you seek. Your harmony is language, we are the words you speak. Our faith we find in service, our hope in others' dreams. Our love and hand of neighbor, our homeland brightly gleams. Inscribe our hearts with justice, your way the path untried. Your truth, the heart of stranger, your life the crucified.